Good evening. It is 6 o'clock and all board members are present. We are going to be moving into executive session under ORS 192.6602D to conduct deliberations with persons designated to carry on labor negotiations. We plan to be back for the rest of the meeting agenda at 7 o'clock if there's anybody out there watching. We're now going to return to regular open session and proceed with the flag salute. Tom, would you read the board superintendent operating agreement, please?
Sure, gladly. Under collaborative governance, members of the board and the superintendent will work together in good faith as a team in the best interest of students, modeling a willingness to learn together. Board members will recognize and respect the superintendent's responsibility to manage the school district and to direct employees in district and school matters. Board members will give careful consideration, listening to all perspectives, to all issues brought to the board by individuals and district leadership. The board may only make decisions at properly called meetings. Board members recognize that individual members have no authority to take individual action in policy or district and school administrative matters, unless so authorized by board vote. Communication agreements. Board members must follow the chain of responsibility and communicate directly with the superintendent when a question arises or a concern or complaint is voiced by a staff member, student, parent, or community member. Board members will endeavor to communicate directly with the superintendent or board chair prior to meetings of the board to address questions and or concerns about agenda items. Board members and the superintendent recognize that good answers often require preparation in advance of board meetings. When a board member and or superintendent has an individual concern, he or she must communicate one-on-one with any member of the board superintendent team as appropriate. In the interest of public transparency and full, robust debate, board members will endeavor to actively engage in and contribute to board discussions and to share their perspectives on topics before the board. Full participation from members in advance of a vote supports the board in making informed, well-considered decisions on important district matters.
Thanks, Tom.
Yep.
Next on the agenda is the agenda review. Is there a motion?
I move to approve the agenda as posted.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda as posted. Any discussion? Call the vote, please.
Owen,
Yes.
Lori,
Yes.
Aaron,
Yes.
Janet,
Yes.
Jennifer,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
all in favor.
All right, next, number 7, the consent agenda. Is there a motion?
Move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the consent agenda. No discussion. Go ahead and call the vote.
Owen,
Yes.
Lori,
Yeah.
Aaron,
Yes.
Jonathan,
Yes.
Janet,
Yes.
Jennifer,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
all in favor.
All right, next up, we have our student representatives, Avery Lords, Senior Class Vice President, and Galilea Hernandez, ASB Secretary.
Good evening. My name is Avery Lord, and I'm the Senior Class Vice President.
Hello, I am Galilea Hernandez, and I am the ASB Secretary. Thank you so much for having us tonight to share the activities happening here at Silverton High School.
Our winter sports have started off strong as the girls and boys basketball, wrestling, and the girls and boys swim teams have had multiple games and meets.
Currently, boys basketball team is 1-2 in league. They have been working really hard and are excited for their game tonight. The girls team is currently 3-0 and are ready for their game tonight. The girls and boys currently have a stacked game at home against South Albany.
Wrestling has had 6 meets this season, and they have another one this Wednesday, the 11th, at 6 p.m. in West Albany. Our girls and boys swim teams have had 2 meets so far, and have another scheduled for Wednesday, the 11th. We encourage everyone to go support all of our winter sports.
The Las Aguilas Club won the prize at the Silverton Community Christmas Fest tree decorating, winning $500 for their club. They hand-painted most of the ornaments for their tree.
Our Interact Club is gearing up for their trash pickup day in February. March is their Sack of Food Drive where they team up with our Key Club, and the annual Daddy-Daughter Dance is coming up, planned for sometime in May or June.
Our Silver Mask Thespian Society just casted Shrek the Musical. It is scheduled to open on February 17th and will be on for that weekend and the next.
Link Crew is already starting applications for next year's Link Leaders, and that will happen in February to early March.
In review of December, we had our Fine Arts Fair display and voting, and we had a successful career day. There was a great crowd at the holiday choir concert.
As we start the new year and head into January, we are getting ready for finals and for our new semester. Some events coming up are Winter Formal, and we have started planning for the Best Fox Ever show coming up in April.
January is School Board Appreciation Month.
So Silverton ASB has prepared some baskets for you guys to say thank you, because we appreciate all you do for Silver Falls School District and for all of our students.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very nice.
Oh, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nice. That is a cool one. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Voucher for our free drink at our Frothy Fox at SHS.
Awesome. Thank you. Tell everybody in ASB that we really appreciate it.
Thank you guys for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, next up is Silver Falls Education Association.
Those are some new hats too. I haven't even seen those yet.
Cool.
Pretty nice. So, hello, my name is Allison Stolfus, and I am president of SFEA this year.
And I'm Emily Rayo. I teach social studies at Butte Creek for middle school.
And Emily, I'm very, very glad that she was willing to be a part of our bargaining team this year. It's her first time. It is my second time. And it stands many times. Well, you've done lots of bargaining. It's lots of bargaining. We've done lots of bargaining.
I think I've been bargaining ever since I got here, but yeah.
So anyway, so I don't know. We're trying to figure out what to, kind of talk about, because obviously we're here to talk about where bargaining's at and what mediation looks like from our perspective. And I was thinking about all the things that we've been through as a school community, and our district office has experienced, and I sat in here a lot with you guys last year and saw what you all experienced. So I think we dissociate a little bit from everything that's happened. So I just want you to breathe this in, okay? You have gone through the COVID pandemic, the masking issues, right? We had lots of masking talks last year. We had societal issues that spilled into our classrooms. I've talked to some of you guys about that. We redrew boundaries with Scott for Robert Frost and Mark Twain. We flipped our teachers back and forth between those schools. We had vaccine mandates for employees, which we talked through with Dan, which was very new territory for schools. Dan had to actually take all those exemption applications, and that's a very weird place to be. I, as a union president, had no training for how to support staff who both thought they were going to pass away in this pandemic or that it didn't exist. So we're dealing with both those sides, and you saw that societally here as a school board, I think. And community protests, which a lot of you guys were on the grounds when we had one of those at the high school, and it was one of the most memorable things that happened to me last year. So with this in mind, I think you can imagine that when we came back to bargaining, that things had changed a little bit, and what we were going to ask for changed, and we needed to make sure that our teachers felt like the things that they had experienced in that were kind of accounted for, and that our contract would move with those experiences.
So we started our open contract bargaining all the way back in April last year. And we wanted to build on some of the language that we had gotten in our last contract, as well as address and account for issues that have come up in the last 3 years through this pandemic as well. All of our language proposals and compensation proposals were reasonable based on, we felt were reasonable based on what other districts are negotiating between their unions. We also surveyed our members before and after this process through our bargaining, before and after each session. So we really feel like what we brought to the table is supported by our staff in every single building.
Yeah, it's interesting as well to tag onto that because we've had quite a bit of teacher turnover. I think we've had like 30 or 35 new staff members join this year, and we've retained quite a few of them. And along with a new workforce from different districts and younger teachers from different kind of points of view, right, what we want changes as a body. So we just wrote down like our last remaining article kind of ask, kind of where we're stuck. And so the first one is Dan and I have had lots of conversations this year about involuntary transfer / reassignment. I think when you're looking at staffing in our buildings, teacher shortages, special shortages and things like that, it's there's going to be inevitable staff shifts, and our contract language as exists right now isn't really clear about how that's supposed to occur. Maybe more involuntary transfer than reassignment. So reassignment would be if you're in like a building, you teach 5th grade, you come to school and you find out you're teaching 3rd grade, something like that, okay? And for people who aren't teachers, I think we've had this talk with Erin, who's at the bargaining team. So for a teacher to do that, it's not just grade school, because there's all the curriculum, the studying, the test writing, all that stuff, all the unit mapping we're doing and whatnot, it all changes. And it's basically, I would say, easily a part-time job on top of a full-time job every time we do that. So we want to make sure there's support and language and a fair process around that issue.
Which also ties into our next issue is class size and caseload protection and workload protection. And part of this is teaching 4 years ago, teaching pre-pandemic to teaching now is such a different world. So much has changed, the students have changed, how we can go about teaching our kids has changed, and the process that we can actually teach them and manage them is completely different. You know, we used to be able to take 5 minutes at our desk, grade something real fast, make our loops. I can't leave my kids alone for 10 seconds unsupervised. You know, we're always moving now. And so those little moments of solace are gone. And the needs that have come from students out of the pandemic is so much more. Mental health issues, there are large deficits academically as well, and that has become too much with some of our class sizes and caseloads, especially for special ed, to manage for one teacher. So part of our language is setting up a way to address those issues. Our current language just gives a process for teachers to be able to complain and bring attention to their class size or caseload, and our language is looking to actually create some form of solutions that teacher can receive from identifying their problems. And our workload has also changed. We have more responsibilities with no more additional support, which is also partly where that class size solution comes into play, is allowing teachers to say, I need help. You know, we've outlined a few ways for teachers to identify that help. Some of it is just having another body in that classroom, having another aide in that classroom. In the middle school at Butte Creek, we don't have any assistant time all day long, which is really, really tough. So to even just be able to identify that within our language, to have an option for an aide for a class period would be huge for those kids, to get those kids that are behind or the kids that are ahead that we can't help, that need more and want to do more, but we don't have the manpower to do that.
And the language we're proposing came from Wilsonville,
Yeah.
essentially,
West
so
and
it's
Wilson.
already in practice.
Mhm.
We're asking for greater protections over termination. I think all teachers, especially in this time where our students are just everything's more challenging, and I know, Jen, you probably experienced this at Woodburn. It's just a little bit trickier to navigate, and we would like a solid foundation that basically forces us, along with our administrators, to use the existing contract language that we obviously work really hard to negotiate, that this is the prudent pathway to follow when there's a disagreement in the classroom.
Fair compensation is another one that's still on the table. We want to retain the amazing teachers that we have in this district. We also want to attract teachers to come and work in our district. And that's hard right now. Part of it also, one of the other things we've looked at our last session was that a master's degree is no longer required to teach in Oregon for a teaching license. And so looking at kind of adjusting our pay schedule to allow teachers that just have a bachelor's to continue down their levels. Right now, after year 9, they top out in salary, and allowing for those teachers to move across to the schedule as well without having to have a master's. For reference, we are asking for a 7% COLA for this year. City of Silverton gave their employees a 6% raise, and Salem Kaiser gave their staff a 4.5% raise without even bargaining, and Woodburn is asking for a 13% raise.
Our last big language article is reopening Article 12 around using specialists for subs. And I think this is a large issue at Woodburn as well. I think their union is bargaining this. But essentially, what happened last year is with COVID, we had our mandatory quarantine period, and we had serious subbing issues, right? We thought this year, with those mandates kind of going away, some new things happening, that we would be better off with the sub situation. And the truth is they're just really not really in the pipe. We've talked to district office a little bit about maybe identifying classified employees that could also sub, or finding some solution. But what we're finding is our specialists, I don't have data on this, but I've had lots of emails. Our specialists, which are counselors, English language specialists, Title I reading specialists, they're being pulled into the classrooms on a pretty regular basis to do substitute teaching. And I feel like there is a educational mandate about why these specialists are in our classrooms. These are our most vulnerable kids, and we can't have said we've gone through COVID and these kids are behind without really shoring up our most vulnerable populations. And so what we're asking for is kind of to readopt the MOU that we signed last year, and I've talked about this already with Dan, is awarding those teachers compensation. Because every time those sub, the district saves that sub money, and it becomes just kind of like an easy thing. It's not what everyone wants to do, it just becomes easy because everything's difficult right now. So we're asking to attach a price tag to that issue so that our specialists don't do someone else's job during the day and then have to time card their work at night, which is what they have told me is happening. So I think that's our last bit.
So throughout our rounds of opening, we've done open bargaining. So we've allowed community members and teachers to come. I think we had like 70 people or so attend our last open bargaining session at the beginning of December. Progress has been slow, we realize that, and partly because of just scheduling issues. Scheduling 16 people to be in the room at the same time is a challenge in itself. But we also, it is our view that the district has been hesitant to make some meaningful progress in our scheduled negotiations.
I think new language is a little unnerving, and everyone knows if there's contract language, it's a new grievable item. So how do we actually put this in action? Whatnot it's difficult, but it needs to happen. So at the last bargaining session, I think we're making article language at the end of our teaching day, and we're working like 6 hours a week during the weeks that we come to bargaining. So we prepared all this language, and we came back, and it was a response to one line of one of those articles. And I think it's just to the point where, and Dan agrees, because when I said it was obvious relief, you know, that we need a mediator. We need set apart time. We need someone to come in, which is where we ended up last contract bargaining, to help us kind of deal with these last little loose ends, and help us come to agreement so that we can move forward and give the teachers the contract that they deserve. We're really looking forward to that, and I understand it's tentatively scheduled
February 1st is for sure.
Oh, first.
Oh, the first.
February 1st for sure.
Oh, okay, great, February 1st.
Tentative second date, February 7th.
Okay. So we made a mediation timeline just to kind of let you know what that looks like, but it was based on February 7th. Right.
So subtract 7 days from all of that.
That's a week.
Yeah. So our first, once mediation occurs, we've got 15 days to reach an agreement within mediation. If we don't reach an agreement within that time, then there's 7 days to give final offers. So if we're starting February 7th, hypothetically, February 22nd then would be that final offer day. Nope. Impact. Skipped a day there. So mediation is February 7th. Final offers are given. We enter the 7 days and then a 30-day cooling off period. So final offers then by March 1st. These days aren't lining up, Allison.
It's what was on the spreadsheet.
That was me messing up in the past me then. So we have final offers within 7 days, and then we cool off for 30 days. So there's no discussions. We all just take a quick breather between it. Okay. If we don't accept the offers at the end of that period, then we have the option to strike after a 10-day notice. So our sample timeline at the end of this would put us, a potential strike, I'm using hardcore air quotes there, like April 10th, which would put us 2 days shy of being a year. I think April 12th was our first day of bargaining. So it's exhausting just reading that, I gotta say. So.
But I think our negotiations have been very respectful. I think they've been slow but respectful, and I'm really hoping that we can meet a middle road. Every time we've talked to our members about, well, which one of these things means the most to you? Which ones of these do you feel most strongly about? We have a mandate that at this point what's left is really, really important, and so look forward to February. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks very much.
Do you guys have any questions? No?
I wanted to say something, Allison. I want to thank you for spelling that out for us. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is that when bargaining happens, you as teachers have to slip on another jersey and represent the union. And you take off that jersey and go back to your jobs and enrich the students that you teach. And that's really commendable, because I know it's been a tough year. And, administrators walk in and they walk out administrators. But you walk in right there as teachers, and you have to be in this formal zone called the union. And it's a lot of work, and it takes a lot of commitment. And thank you for everything you do.
Thank you. I think everything that we're asking for, there's not one thing that wouldn't benefit your kids in the long run.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, ladies. All right, next on the agenda is public comment. We're glad you're here and welcome you to address the board with your ideas, concerns, or compliments. Please keep the following in mind. If you wish to speak, please raise your hand to be recognized by the board chair. If attending remotely, please use the raise hand feature within Zoom. For the record, please provide your name and relationship to the district. Please keep individual remarks to 3 minutes. If speaking as a representative on behalf of a group of 3 or more, comment time will be extended to 5 minutes. A second public comment period will occur later in the meeting that is specific to discussion and action items only. The board will not hear complaints against individual district staff or board members during public comment. Please understand that the board's primary role is to listen, and you likely will not receive an immediate response. Finally, remember, we all model the way for our students and ask that you share your thoughts respectfully and in accordance with the Silver Falls School District Board Decorum Agreement. So we'll start with anybody in the live audience. Is there public comment? Come on up. Can you provide your name for us?
My name is Mary Ann Rush.
And what's your relationship to the district?
My son goes here.
Okay, and what topic are you going to speak about?
I am talking about just some concerns I have about our educational ranking and some of the things. There's no teachers' names.
Okay.
I didn't even mention the school he goes to.
So we're going to give you 3 minutes, and you'll get a signal at 30 seconds and then time.
My daughter, who was in speech and debate here 10 years ago, she helped me with this. So, I have given careful thought to what I want to say tonight. Recently, it was reported that Oregon ranked 46th nationally in education, while being in the top 10 for high school dropouts. What are we doing wrong? I never questioned the school system before. I always thought it was a place to grow in academics and arts, while being a place kids are taught structure outside the home, self-accountability. The pandemic changed my perspective, especially Oregon's response to our children's lacking skills due to these lockdowns. They lowered requirements. So why are we only in the top 10? Why are we in the top 10% for dropouts? What college will consider our children as educated? So during the holidays, I asked my 2 older kids for their perspective. Did high school prepare them? My oldest, who graduated in 2013, said it was totally worthless. It's nothing like real life. I learned more on the streets. While she was in school, I remember asking one of her teachers why he didn't fail her for not turning in her homework until the last day of marking period. Instead, she received an A. The first day of school the following year, she came home angry and said, "Thanks, Mom. Now I have to do my homework to repeat tests." What? I was told it helped solidify information. I always thought that's what homework was for. My second kid graduated in 2016. She said it really helped, especially the finance classes. I remember her having a 12th grade English class, and she had to compare and contrast. But the assignment, part of it, was to draw a Snapchat in English class, 12th grade. She graduated with honors, however, but she couldn't spell friend. She also had a graduating class with 15 valedictorians and 14 salutatorians. Now let me ask you, every one of you, do you go 1, 1, 1, 1, and then 2, 2, 2 until you get to that? No. It'd be great if everybody could be exactly the same, be it academically or athletically, but it's not reality. So what happens when these kids go to job interviews? Do they split the job? Because they're both equally, okay for it. And I love my second daughter, but ever since she's had her first job, she's told every
30
single
seconds.
manager what they're doing wrong. She's told every single manager, this is how you're supposed to do it. This is how you're supposed to listen to me and follow my beliefs and yada, yada, yada. And she got mad for not being promoted. My last one, he'll be graduating in 2027. So I want to fix what's wrong. We have weekly early release, monthly teacher workshops. Am I the only parent asking why? What goes on in these teacher workshops and everything?
It's time.
But I'm not a good speaker. My whole thing started because I want a PTA. I want teachers and parents to come together. I'm not here to bash the school system. My son's teacher is the bomb. I love him. But we got to work together. We don't do this. I was supposed to get a phone call from my son's principal. I never got that call about what they have in place. So, I'm not a debater.
Thank you. Is there anybody else? Actually, we'll take somebody online. Is there anybody online?
No hands raised.
All right, anybody else in the audience want to give public comment?
Okay,
So name, relationship to the district,
yes,
topic.
absolutely. My name is Josh Ort. I am a business owner. I've got 2 kids currently in the district and soon to be another one. And the topic for discussion is social media and how we're using it as a community. And the topic of the subject is particularly to this community and not to you all.
Okay, 3
So,
minutes.
Hello, good people. Good to see you again. I want to congratulate you about all the hard work, but the great work you guys continue to do. My topic for approach is social media and how we use it as a community. First of all, I don't have it. My office doesn't use it. My family doesn't use it. Despite that, its reach is still felt, and I'm still aware of most current events. It's one of these current events that has compelled me to come tonight. It's come to my attention that some people in the public are using Facebook to bring issue with what appears to be an ultimate goal of obtaining the termination of a Silver Falls district employee. Their reasoning? Personal religious belief held outside the employee's public work duties. I have not heard any complaints about this educator discriminating against kids in regards to their beliefs, sexual orientation, or socioeconomic status. The only complaint I have heard about this educator is about their personal held beliefs and the fear that they can't separate private life from public duty. A couple comments made on Facebook were, or are, that it is best when people keep their biases and predilections stored away in their back pocket. And if you think gay and trans kids will not be aware of this person's homophobic views, you'd be wrong. The hypocrisy and outright ignorance of those statements is baffling. Look in a mirror. Going onto Facebook to spread information about your opinions about a person so they see them in the light you want them to is biased. And their personal beliefs they may or may not have would not be widely available if you did not post and share that information you claim should be hidden from the public. From our district website, the district prohibits discrimination, harassment on any basis protected by law, including but not limited to an individual's perceived or actual race, color, religion, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, national or ethnic origin, marital status, age, mental or physical disability, pregnancy, family status, economic status, or veteran status. The district further prohibits anyone from coercing, intimidating, threatening, or interfering with an individual for exercising any rights guaranteed under state or federal law. That is part of the non-discrimination district charge. It should be the same for our community. Look, is this what we've become? Think like me, or you're wrong, or I'll take your job from you? What happened to if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all? Now, some words about this employee and the whole point of me coming up. I know this employee. They're the best of us. They are kind, considerate, patient, discreet, wise, passionate, and about kids. They model behaviors that I wish I had
Josh,
on a more consistent... What?
I'm feeling uncomfortable about talking about a district employee
Okay.
specifically because we have a policy that talks about not talking about employees.
Oh, even though no names?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, I got last paragraph not about that.
Okay, go for it.
Okay, thank you. Lastly, I firmly believe we can figure this out in our small, awesome community. And we are awesome, make no mistake. It can spread to others. So I leave with this, intention. What is your intention with your actions? Evaluate your heart before you post. Evaluate your heart before you speak to people. Why are you saying the things you are saying? Is it to bring us together? Is it to find common ground? Is it loving? Oh, sorry, that was it.
All right.
Okay, thank you, sorry.
Thank you.
If I knew that, I wouldn't have done that, I apologize.
Well, no, it's all good.
And thank you
It's
for
all good.
correcting me.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Josh.
Anybody online? Anybody else in the audience want to give public comment? All right, well, there is a second public comment time later in the agenda, limited to discussion and action items. Next up is Janet Medina Avila from the Oregon School Boards Association, and she is here to help us plan our superintendent evaluation segment called a targeted feedback survey. Hi, Janet.
Janet?
Crazy how time flies. All right, so I need to make sure that I am a panelist. Bear with patience while I got switched over to being a panelist. All right, welcome. Thank you for having me. Janet from Oregon School Boards Association, for those in the audience. I've been working with the board quite a few times, and so thank you for asking me to come back and help you with your superintendent evaluation process. So tonight we are going to be just talking about the targeted feedback survey, and this is what we call your planning session. So again, just a refresher, as part of the evaluation workbook with OSBA that was co-developed with COSA, it's a 5-part evaluation tool. The targeted feedback survey is an optional piece, but you decided in open session that you wanted this to be a part of the evaluation for this year. So that is what we are doing tonight. Tonight we're gonna be selecting the standards, and what I mean by that is those are the standards that there's going to be tailored questions for each audience, internal and external, and we'll get more to the details here in a moment. But you get to select the standards that those questions are going to be tailored for, that the targeted feedback survey participants will answer. And so I'll explain that. It'll make more sense as we walk through it tonight. Then we're also going to identify and start identifying survey participants, because that is a collaborative process with the board and the superintendent, and so we're going to be doing that tonight. And then just going over the survey timeline so you're aware of when the survey is going to happen and when you will get the results of the survey and how that's going to look. And then we'll wrap up with just some next steps and questions and comments from the board. So hopefully not too long of a process. I know you have a long night, but let's get started. So you should have in front of you a worksheet. I apologize, I didn't realize it was going to be such small print, but Debbie is amazing and has reprinted a new worksheet that I usually use with boards, but just disregard step number 2. Sorry. And so what I'm going to ask each individual board member to do in the next 10 to 15 minutes, if it's less, that's fine. Just I'll know you're done when your pen and pencil and you're looking up. That will be kind of my way to see if you're done. I'll be checking in on the time. We're going to do this little standard selection activity. You're going to reflect on your own utilizing that worksheet. As you see in front of you, there are 7 standards. Standard 8 is omitted because the purpose of the targeted feedback survey is for the board, for you to get additional information that you wouldn't just get off your own observations. And so keep that in mind as you are looking through all of the standards. Each of you are going to select your top 3. We're going to compile all of that. I'm going to be putting it up here on what I call a virtual whiteboard, so you can see kind of what each board member selected and kind of narrow down to the top 3. We usually recommend that you only select 3 or 4 standards that, again, the questions will then be tailored to. So I'm going to give you 10 to 15 minutes. As you are looking through those standards, all 7, because again, 8 is omitted, I want you to just kind of think about what are the areas that the board may lack direct knowledge on or will need additional information, either from internal stakeholders or staff or folks at the district level, administrators, teachers. Think outside the box, and we'll be talking more about that when you select survey participants. But also, you know, what other areas maybe would provide you further insight from community members, students, parents, or community-based organizations. So just these are some guiding questions to help you as you are going through each 7. Read the descriptors. All of the descriptors go with each standard. You've done this before, so I'm not going to try to be super repetitive. But yeah, pick your top 3, and then we will collect your ideas together and try to compile and condense it to 3. Oh yeah, an extra worksheet. Thank you. Perfect, thank you. look at the other sheet, not this one, but the kind of PowerPoint slide one, I did highlight and underscore some areas to kind of help you that are kind of to pay attention, some keywords that might help you see which ones identify for internal versus external stakeholders. So
Are we supposed to have more than one sheet?
just one, there's double-sided, so there's a total of 7 and you need to select 3.
There's more coming.
Oh, that's what I was thinking.
Oh, that one, yes, that was the original, and I was like, the print is so small, so we decided to give you a different one. But I
Oh,
did
okay.
underscore a couple things that might help you as you're reflecting.
So you're saying pick our top 3 of the 7?
Of the
and
7
then, and then up to
standards.
3 descriptors under each?
No, skip step 2, so that's why I originally didn't give you this
Okay.
handout, so my apologies. Skip step 2, just select the standards, but use the descriptors as your guidance, because you will be evaluating on all descriptors. That's
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, just pick 3 standards. Great question. All right.
Yep.
Awesome. Just want to make sure. Again, I don't want to rush you through this. Okay, great. So in no particular order, this is just what I just went onto your website and just jotted down the order. So there's no particular order. So I'm just going to start with who I had jotted down first. So Janet, what were your, just tell me the number for the standard, and I'm going to put it up here so everybody can see. What were your top 3?
3, 4, and 5.
Okay. Thank you. Owen?
3, 5, and 6. Excuse me, 3, 5, and 6.
Oh, 3, 5, and 6. Thank you. Lori?
Yes, 3, 4, and 1.
3, 4, and 1. Jennifer?
3, 5, and 6.
3, 5, 6. Aaron?
2, 3, and 6.
2, 3, and 6. Yep. Jonathan?
2, 4, and 6.
Tom?
1, 5, and 6.
So you're seeing there, just by looking at the numbers, there are some similarities, but now what I'm going to do is just aggregate everything. So for standard 1, we had 1, 2. For standard 2, there was 1, 2 again. Standard 3 was popular, it looks like. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of you. So the majority there. Standard 4, 1, 2, 3. And then standard 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, so the majority. Standard 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so that one was popular as well. You start seeing, and then standard 7, I don't think anybody selected. Okay. And that's okay. 0. So now looking at the aggregated selection, you can kind of see what we're, there was a close, right? So definitely standard 3 and standard 6, and then it's kind of, you know, standard 5, 4 of you, so majority, however, standard 4. So we can kind of discuss that and see which one you would agree, but does everyone kind of agree that standard 3 and standard 6 are absolute yes? So looking at standard 3, which is inclusive district culture, and then standard 6, which is effective organizational management. Everybody agree with that? Pretty clear with the, with the aggregated scores. Then the next standard that was selected was standard 5, which is around communication, community relations. That one is usually a very popular standard. And then standard 4, which came basically in second to standard 5, is around culture responsive instructional leadership and improvement. And so what I'll say is sometimes 3 and 4 folks kind of taggle with which one should we choose, which one makes more sense. So just looking at those, do you still believe 3 would be the main one, or do you feel 4 should also be included? Just take a moment to kind of think about that. Looking at, on your paper, standard 3 and standard 4, looking at the descriptors, Do you think standard 3 would be enough, or is there something in standard 4?
I think a lot.
Oh, we're thinking, right?
What, sorry?
Are you giving us think time right now?
Oh, I can give you think time. Yeah, let's do that. We'll give you 2
Oh,
to 3 minutes.
or-
and-
I'm happy to talk. I'm happy to respond, but I thought we were thinking. I'm sorry. I
If
didn't
you
mean to
all,
cut
what
you
would be
off.
better? Do you want to think on it for a couple minutes and then report out?
No, go ahead and start.
Okay.
I was just gonna say, I was thinking the same thing, Janet, like 3 and 4 are so similar, and I think
Mhm.
3, I think you're gonna get a lot of the data from 4 in 3 if you ask questions on 3. You know what I'm saying? I think you're gonna catch a lot of that with in terms of like cultural response, because one of the tenets under there on 3.1 is develops and maintains supportive, equitable, culturally responsible, and inclusive district culture. So you might get some of the culturally responsible, responsive feedback, because that's something under 3 as well. But to your point, I think they're very similar.
I'm going to advocate for 3 because standard 4 is Scott's passion, and he reports on this every week to us.
Okay.
It's really transparent already. And so 3, we could get some, like we're at 30,000 feet, right? And we want to get to student level on district culture, I think. That's the difference for me. Like I see a lot of data already on the instructional leadership.
Any other comments?
I got no concern moving to 3 over my 4 vote. They were kind of a coin toss. So.
All
I
board
could
members?
support that.
All board members
Moving with
agree?
3 and
Okay.
over 4, yeah.
3.
3 is fine. Okay. And the reason I say that is we always want to try to get to 3 because you want to have a manageable size of questions. However, sometimes I have allowed boards to, if they feel really strongly and it's, let's say, a split, and maybe even if it's just one descriptor, there's a possibility we could still add that question because the questions are tied to the standards and to the descriptors. So just want to let you know you don't have to automatically, cancel it out.
Can I just interrupt for a second?
Mhm.
I think the only one that I would want to make sure we included, and it might be somewhere else, I just haven't seen it,
Mhm.
is a coordinated systems of support, including coaching and professional development for staff, because that would be one that staff would, if we were surveying staff, would be able to really comment on. But I'm wondering if that's also somewhere else.
What standard is that?
That is, so
4.
that's standard 4,
Oh,
descriptor number 2.
Uh-huh.
So if we tossed out standard 4, could we make sure that that was, that the issue of staff support and professional development was either included in 3, which seems a little strange, or picked up somewhere else?
It's a little different, but standard 6, number 1,
Okay.
it's definitely different, but I see it having some overlap with hiring, recruiting, development, retaining.
Oh, or 4, standard, descriptor 4,
Yeah.
and so, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
professional development for all staff.
Good point. It kind of might target that. Yep.
There just is something specific about a coordinated system of support that
Yeah,
seems important.
I agree, and I think that could substitute for, like, standard 6, there are a couple things, again, that are super transparent in Scott's practice. And I think that your number 2 from standard 4 might be more important than some of those things in standard 6. But I do think 6.2 is really important. So I wouldn't want to lose that, but I don't mind shedding anything else, really.
So here's what I would propose, because that descriptor is just one question, the specific descriptor in standard 4. So I don't think adding one question to the staff is like a huge,
Oh,
if it
good.
was like 3 questions, because I know how many questions each standard and descriptor has. I have my cheat sheet in front of me, because I do not have all those memorized. So I wouldn't mind if everybody really feels strongly that descriptor 2 and standard 4 needs to be included in order to encompass really why that one got a second choice, was almost second to standard 3. because it is just one additional question for staff.
So we don't need to find a place for it to live, we can just add it
Yeah,
on?
I can just
on.
add,
Oh,
yes,
okay,
exactly,
okay.
yeah,
Pick
that's
that
why
out.
I say we wanna aim for 3 because that's a manageable size.
Mhm.
However, sometimes I do have boards that are really strongly, want another standard. And again, this is for you to get additional insight into what, and I like what Jennifer is saying, think about the reports you've been receiving,
Right.
things that you haven't, received information on, so, that's kind of what the planning session is for, is to help you identify those areas. So if everybody's in agreement that they feel strongly that standard 4, descriptor 2 needs to be included as part of the question, then I'm happy to include it. Because again, it's just one additional question.
I think we're in agreement.
Okay. Great. So in conclusion, so you've selected, let me go back up now to my, so you've selected standard 3, inclusive district culture, standard 4, only descriptor 2, and then standard 5 and standard 6.
Yep.
Correct? Okay. And that is a pretty good
Now, to your point, Jennifer, were there some, again, just to trying to be really targeted and efficient, were there some under 6 that we just felt were not valuable? I mean, we can do that too, right? Is just take descriptors out that we just don't feel like, or is that not recommended?
You could. I will say for standard 6, if that's the one you're considering, there are no community questions for that one. There's just gonna be staff, because that's about the effective
okay.
organizational management. We don't have any that are tailored to community, because they wouldn't have any insight into that particular standard. So I don't think it would be a big,
It's not overloading anybody.
yeah, it's not
Okay.
overloading it, correct.
Okay.
Right now, looking at the questions, you have a pretty good mix. You have about 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, about like 15 questions for staff, and then 11 for community. So you have a pretty
Okay.
good balance right
Yes.
now. Yeah. Let's see, hold on, actually. Yeah, so 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Actually, you have 21 for staff, so it is a little bit on the heavy side. So if you wanted to eliminate,
I would say 6.1 to me.
Yeah,
I
I was thinking the same thing.
think that we know that's a clear strength
That's been demonstrated.
that we don't need additional information on, but I don't want to steamroll the conversation.
Well, I don't need more information on it. There is a part of me that would be curious if staff agrees with what I think on it.
Well, yes.
So,
That's one of the reasons I selected 6 as well, was that thought.
Yeah, and that's like the most important thing that leads to everything else.
Right.
To do everything else on here, you gotta hire right. So that's why I circled 6.
Number 3 feels kind of vague to me, and I don't know how anyone really evaluates that. It felt really general, and I'm not sure that anyone, well, I guess the staff would be able to, when we talk about maintains organizational structures that maximize the district's capacity to positively impact student learning. I mean, it feels important, I'm just not entirely sure I know what's meant by that, and whether it's specific enough.
I think we're going to get a lot of that in 4.2,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm willing to let that one go. Again, I don't want to speak for everybody else, so.
and again, right now, you have 21 questions for staff, so that's a little heavy. Usually we like to go into like 15 or lower, and then for community you have 10. So I think for community you have a good number. For staff, you are a little bit on the heavy side, but that, again, that's just because we added that additional, but even then that would still be 20 questions with that standard 4.
So taking out 6.3 help?
6.3 and 6.1, if those are the ones, yeah.
Well, I don't know, we have agreement on one.
I think
Oh.
6.3.
Yeah, just 3.
Helps a little bit, yes. Yep. Narrow it to 19 questions.
19.
If you eliminate standard 3 on, descriptor 3 on standard 6.
Okay. And then let's maybe take a quick look at standard 5 and see if there's anything in there that you feel like is redundant or. Number 1's a little vague, but.
Is 5 predominantly going out to the community
Looks like
anyway?
that's
Is that
mostly
gonna?
having
Oh, that's
community.
Yeah,
It's probably not
5
as
is
bad as,
community, yeah.
Probably not the
That
teachers.
one, 5 is going out to both. There's
It
gonna
does
be a
go,
mix.
okay.
It goes out to both, yep. Standard 6 is the one that would only go out to staff,
Okay.
correct. But community and community relations, that's something that both
Well,
the
e-
community and the staff.
Even if it's a little bit heavy, and the selection of the people is sound, and this is the first time we've really done this collectively,
Mhm.
it may be heavy this time,
Sure.
you
Yeah.
know, and maybe we just have to roll with that and say, you know, especially our staff say, look, this is the first time we're doing this as a board, we really covet your
Mhm.
responses.
Right.
We know it's a
Yeah.
little heavy
Yeah.
amongst all the other 9,000 things you have to do during the day.
Right,
And they
right.
asked for
And
the
they-
option, correct?
Yeah.
And we let
having
them
an
know
influence
this is
there, and so
for,
this
you know,
is-
the
this is something
superintendent
they'd asked for.
evaluation,
Yep.
so.
Right.
The folks you select, and we're gonna get to that, the participants list.
Okay.
You wanna make sure it's participants that, have worked closely with the superintendent, really can provide insight. So that's a really good point too. So if you do eliminate that, descriptor 3 and standard 6, it will make it 19 questions
I
instead of
think
20.
I think we roll with that, and we'd still have 11 or 10 with the community.
Roll with 19?
I'm okay with that. It's a little
Okay.
heavy, but it's not,
Yeah.
it's less than 20 now.
Yes, true. All right, so 19 for staff and then 10 for community. Okay, so, so again, just to make sure we're all understanding, standard 3, that will go out to everyone. That is the total, so standard 3 will go out, all descriptors. Standard 4, only descriptor 2, which is only gonna be a staff question because there are no community questions. Standard 5 is a mix of both staff and community questions. And then standard 6, eliminating descriptor 3, which is only 2 questions for staff. It brings you to a total of 19 staff and 10 community.
Can we live with that?
Yeah.
Yep.
I think we're good.
Yep.
Okay, fantastic. I'm gonna save this. Beautiful. So let's move on to our next agenda item. Oh, let me share screen. Doesn't let me move multiple slides. Okay. Oh, go back. All right, so now that you've selected your standards, now all of you probably should have selected them so that way you know, because the next part is survey participants. And so we're gonna identify tonight internal and external. And I know last time we met, you had asked me what's best practice for selecting who gets to take the survey. And that's why it's called a targeted feedback survey, because you wanna be very specific on who takes it. And it's okay for you right now to name, typically it's departments, it can be specific staff. You want to think broadly across the district and look at the standards that you selected on who do you think in the staff district level crosswide would give you the most insight into those specific standards. You don't get to see the questions, but they are tailored to the standards. You do know that. The survey will be 100% anonymous, and even though right now you're going to be discussing potential names and whatnot, you will not know what the response is for each of those individuals. That stays anonymous. You get the results in a high level, looking at themes. You will not see the questions, and you will not see how each individual responded to each question.
Janet, when you were here last year, though, you also talked about collaborating with the superintendent to come up with this list.
Yes, and so that's how we're gonna do that tonight.
Okay.
That would be my best practice, is to do it as part of your TFS planning session. And so superintendent, you're gonna be participating in this. I'm gonna put you in pairs for this next activity. And we're gonna jot down based on, I want you to either a piece of paper if you have one, pen with your partner. It's just gonna be whoever you're sitting next to, superintendent. I'm gonna ask you to join because there's an odd number, and this is perfect because you also need to provide insight into the participant list. We're gonna compile everyone's kind of list of either names, departments, and start to identify and narrow that list of who should be a part of the internal. So we're only gonna talk about internal stakeholders right now. We'll also do external, the same activity, but in your pairs for 10 minutes. I want you to think again, who do you think, based on the standards that you selected, standard 3, standard 4, just that one descriptor, standard 5 and 6, internally would give you the most insight? And so just with your pair, so Lori and Tom, Jonathan and Aaron, Jennifer and Janet, and Owen and Scott. Together, you're gonna just jot down and brainstorm ideas. And then you're gonna share your little list. Try to come up with 3 to 5 at most, and then together you can compile a bigger list. And so what we're gonna do is on that virtual whiteboard, you'll see how I'm gonna compile everybody's information.
I just want to be clear. So we're in a public meeting. It's been a long day. Are we throwing around names in a public meeting? Is that what we're doing? Because I don't know. I feel like I'm being.
Me too.
I feel like I'm being put on the spot for something, and this is something that takes deep reflection if it's going to be useful to me.
So this protocol, you guys didn't talk about this protocol.
We talked about it, and I think you had mentioned, Janet, on more of a higher level, that maybe we pull certain titles,
Yeah.
roles, you know,
departments.
Yeah.
you know, from like internal and then even from our community members, we can do that. Maybe we just go with that for tonight.
Yeah, absolutely.
There might be individuals who we would name.
But
who
titles,
would-
but titles are names. There's a name associated with these titles.
Some of them, yes, right.
Yeah, but you can be more vague. you
I
know.
just don't want other people, I don't want people to feel like they've been
Well, I
committed
think
to something that they
we're
don't
also
really
putting
wanna do.
others on the spot who
Right,
aren't in this
yes.
meeting who will watch this later. There's just something about this that doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
I agree. I wonder if,
It does have to be collaborative, and I totally understand that. The survey, when we give it out, those individuals can opt out. They do not need to take it.
Well,
Is this something we could revisit at a later time if we at least pull themes now to do the actual more naming if we felt more comfortable? And I don't know if this is, again, I'm asking, could this be done in an executive session? Just at least this portion of it to actually identify the name of our participants.
So the answer is no to that, but I think what you can do is tonight at least kind of do it more high level. Because Debbie would then give me the email, we do need the email contacts lists sent to us. And so maybe the superintendent and the chair can then discuss based on this list what the names should be, and then kind of, yeah. That would be my second, that would be my next best practice.
but everything that we write down is a public record. And so that's, again, my concern, that if we write down our ideas, like the head of this department or this person, and then that ends up not being the person that gets selected, it's like, it could be a huge distraction, I guess. So, yeah, I'm wondering if we can go back to the drawing board on how the participants are selected, because I wasn't expecting this tonight. I went back and reviewed the video from the last time you were here before this meeting, and there was an ask for like, how do other districts handle this? I think Jonathan asked that, and several different things were thrown out, and so I think you remember during that meeting, I expressed like 4 times, I don't feel super comfortable talking about names during an open meeting. So I don't know. I wonder what options we can recommend.
How many are we looking for? How many names are we looking for total?
Typically, when it comes to just a manageable size, typically when it comes to the internal and external, it can range from 15 names to 25. I will say, when it comes to staff, the response rate is usually about 75% or higher. When it comes to community, the response rate is usually 50% or lower. So you want to put that into consideration, as well as having a manageable size where you know that the response rate for community is going to be a little bit less than the response rate for staff. That's usually what we see typically with the response rate. Here's what I'm going to propose, because I did go and ask, best practices, and that was what my team discussed. We did bring this up. How about we take a quick 5-minute break, and let me kind of assess and see what we can do. Just take a quick 5-minute break, and let's come back and gather and see if I can come up with kind of a better solution.
Sure. Is that, everybody
fine.
okay with that?
Works for me.
So about 8:20?
Yes.
Okay, we will recess then until 8:20.
Perfect.
There we go. All right, we are back in regular session now.
Perfect. Thank you so much for giving me the 5 minutes. So here's the proposal. And this is just, the board doesn't need to do a formal motion or approval. We just need to agree to the process here in open session. The superintendent and the chair can create a list for internal and external. They can then share that list to all the board members. If board members, have any suggestions, additional comments to that list, letting the superintendent know. What you want to make sure with email, though, is to not discuss, just a one-way communication. And then the superintendent can kind of revise the list, or kind of based on the suggestions with those individual board members. But that would be the next best alternative, because I definitely see your concerns, I hear your concerns, and so that would be the alternate option.
And so we wouldn't have to, we would just agree to that process now and entrust the superintendent and myself to execute that, and we don't have to approve it at any other stage.
Correct. You will just have to meet a deadline, which we'll talk about next, the timeline for executing the survey and getting and having enough time, so we'll talk about that. But if the board agrees with that process, then we can proceed forward and not do the activity.
The only idea I had, which could be helpful, but I could go either way, would be to identify stakeholder groups, so that the board has a sense that there's a diversity of groups that would be represented. And diversity isn't necessarily the utmost, because like you said, you want to target groups and individuals for the information that we're trying to get. But I also think we want to be sure that we are getting as representative a sample as we can from a variety of different people, right? And so I don't know if it would be worthwhile to have, that conversation. So when we talk about internal, for instance, do we want a representation from across the schools? Do we want a representation across seniority of like, there's so many ways that you can say, how do we get a good representation of ideas and input? And which groups are important for us to make sure, classified staff, licensed staff, members of the union, that's kind of thing. Like, those are the sort of stakeholder groups that I would think of. And does the board want to be able to say, these are the groups we feel like it's important to look at? Or is it enough to tell our chair, our vice chair, our superintendent, hey, make sure you get a diversity of input?
No, I think that having that conversation could be valuable, because we can then act on it, or not, if there are if there are issues that we don't see as a board, but we, when we meet in a smaller group, we see them. But I'm happy to discuss that. Others?
Yeah, I kind of thought you might come up with the proposal that you came up with, and the one concern that I have with the proposal is that it's our evaluation of Scott, and so Scott should probably be, just from appearances, have less influence on picking the targets. So I don't know if maybe our board chair and our vice chair, along with Scott as a third party, not to put more work on everybody, but I would probably feel a little bit better about that. Not that I think he would suppress or do anything, but just appearance-wise.
You'd be involved in the process, but the ultimate say comes down to.
Yeah, and then having one other person that you can talk with and think it over with, rather than just with Scott.
Oh, well, what about, can we, like I see that Debbie and our director of personnel would also be helpful
Yep.
in that because they know the people too, and they're not the people being evaluated.
Yeah.
Other thoughts?
I'll second what Owen said. I think it's a good idea.
Just get a work group, some sort of a group. That seems right.
You want to make sure it's not a committee. I will say that, because you don't want to, you know, you need to follow public laws. So if it's just the vice chair and the chair and the superintendent, I think that would still be okay, because the vice chair, you know, works alongside with the chair. You okay with that, Scott?
And they can call whoever they want for advice. I mean, if you want to call Debbie or Scott or Dan or anybody, just for names, that's.
Do you want to have the discussion that Janet proposed, just about what ways to think about groups that might be important? Because I'm sure this group would think about something that just the two of us wouldn't think of.
I mean, are there any other stakeholder groups that come to mind that we feel like it's important to include?
I don't know if this is an important one or not, but it's one that came to mind, would be maybe more senior educators, maybe people that have been, you know, here 10 years or more, something like that. That might be a classification that could be helpful and target somewhere.
Or at least being cognizant of the seniority spectrum, because maybe we also need to hear from the newbies because we want to hear how they're
Exactly.
being supported.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So a mix of senior and new staff.
And I heard geographic.
Yeah, and make sure that we're representing our outlying schools and our in-town school, you know,
Like a
again, it
mix of
becomes difficult.
administrators.
But yeah, I think for this has as much to do, to your point, Owen, about just the look of it. It has as much to do with the kind of credibility the survey results bring. That when we're reading them, you know, that the public has a sense that, okay, yeah, we've all, you know, this was a good sample. We didn't just go cherry pick certain people who we thought would provide us with a certain type of information. We really wanted to know, how are things going, you know?
Yeah, I agree. People that have been here a long time, people that haven't, principals that have, new principals, right? I mean, those are very different categories, right? But I trust these guys to come up with a list that's representative, and so I guess beyond that, I don't have much else to add, especially if we get to see it before it's final. I mean,
So yeah, we'll collect those and then we email it out as a FYI to everybody.
Yep.
If anybody has any objection or strong feelings, they can email just like board chair directly.
Or Scott, yeah. Or trans, yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Yep.
Any other thoughts about external candidates? I mean, I don't know. We don't want to talk about specific people, but it's a little bit different than talking just about seniority, and I guess
It's harder for those guys. I mean, I think it would be more difficult to identify community members without feeling that you're biasing the sample. I think that's difficult for one or two people to do.
Well, you got to think about the community. Who does Scott interact with, right?
Well, that's a good
You know,
point.
because somebody you might send it out to and like
Yeah.
no offense to Scott, hey, I've never met the guy. Like, I
Right,
can't answer
right.
this. You know, there are people out there. Scott hasn't had the opportunity to meet yet.
That's what we recommend. It's someone that's worked or been in close relation with the superintendent, can actually speak to the superintendent's performance. Yep.
yeah. So that is, I mean, that's the other side of what Owen's talking about. You know, he's like, well, we're the evaluators. We should, you know, make sure that there's some kind of, I don't even know what the word is, but the process maybe should skew a little bit towards us being in charge. And at the same time, Scott's got to tell us who he works with.
Right.
Yeah, we got to see your address book.
No,
That's why this piece has to be collaborative.
Scott's a stakeholder
You've got it.
on the collection, but the decision comes to us. So
There we go.
And you as a board tonight can set those parameters, so I like what Janet, you proposed, and saying, well, you know, maybe we should discuss at least broadly, and making sure that X, Y, and Z gets identified when that list is getting created.
Okay, if we're ready to move on, what's our timeline?
Yes, let's look at that. So I've jotted this down and I can send it, or I believe Debbie probably captured it as well. So let me stop sharing this and sharing next steps so that you can kind of prepare. But before I get to that, I know I had mentioned that you don't get to see the questions, right? There are some questions you get to see, and those are what we call open-ended. And so this is a sample. We usually just say 2, no more, especially now that you know there's going to be 19 for staff and 10 for community. But we do offer the opportunity for the board to create 1 to 2 open-ended questions. So this is usually, oh man, why does it keep doing that? Sorry. Technology, okay. Usually this is kind of what boards pick of the 2. I've had some boards be more specific and say, can you list 1 to 2 specific examples? I will say when it comes to the survey, when we administer it, we make it very clear, and there's even a clause that say this is not a space for public complaints. There's a separate policy for that. So although we can't, monitor, we can't, people may decide to make it a use for public complaint, but we do make it very clear to avoid that. But it is a space for you to get just any additional. So is there a question, or do you want both of these questions? Again, participants get to decide if they skip any of the questions in the survey. But if this is something that you want to be a part of the targeted feedback survey, or if you want to modify.
These questions seem a little, they're really open-ended. I would prefer if there was reference to student outcomes, because that's the whole reason why we do this, and those are pretty broad, and yeah, I guess I just would like to narrow it to student outcomes.
Any other comments, suggestions from the board?
I think sometimes what I struggle with is that I understand what Jennifer's saying is that if they're so open-ended that you can end up getting stuff that you don't want.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we have to remember that it can't always, sometimes I think we're encouraged just to say only the best things, but sometimes there's a problem. Or maybe there's something that might be overlooked, or something that might need some tailoring. And I think if people can exercise a little discretion, if they say, well, I'd like to see a little bit more of this, as opposed, and it's not necessarily a negative, but it's also just something to kind of raise a flag to and say, hey, or can you, how do we work that in so people feel comfortable enough to say something that they might not totally understand, or they feel is deficient, without going down the trail of it becoming a harsh critique, which it shouldn't be.
Mm-hmm.
Lori, I have no problem with either of these questions.
They're very broad, though.
They are, but just using, everything that we do should affect students.
Yes.
And that's what I'm getting at. Make the question really focus. What are the areas of improvement? Well, what could the superintendent do to increase student outcomes, or something like that. That's really student achievement. There we go.
That's better. You could say list 1 specific example or 1 to 2 specific examples if you really want to be. I have seen that. And then basically duplicating the same thing, but instead of working well, what are some areas for improvement? Because it is important to look at the areas of strength, but then also the areas of growth.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I think your point is a good one, Jennifer, is because I'm looking at these going, okay, imagine what some responses could be. All right, now how do we act on those? And if they're out of our lane, then how do we say, okay, well now, we're evaluating these things. I don't know, it does feel helpful, because if we hear specific things, then that feels more actionable to me to be able to give guidance to our superintendent to say, here are some areas you know, that we feel would be important to focus on.
It can be very authentic conversation without it going into a pit. I mean, it can, and I think if we can somehow, how do we say this? If it can be handled in that way, respectfully, as opposed to just having it.
So for number 2, can we say something like, what areas, I don't know, I think number 2 is still too broad. It would,
Oh, yeah, just maybe duplicating it, but instead of
just the
working well,
improvement on
what
what?
areas offer room for, instead of saying working well, we could just change, my suggestion would be just changing working well to what are some areas that need room for growth or room for improvement, and then keeping the rest of the language.
okay, got
That
it.
would be my suggestion. But having a working well and a not say not working well, but areas of growth or areas of improvement.
I have no issue making it more concise, but I would say any response we get, I guess, Janet, to your comment, I think any response we get, no matter what it is in our lane. That's the only lane we have almost, is evaluation. So, I mean,
Right.
so
Yeah.
it doesn't almost matter what it is, right?
I do also want to remind you that you will not get to see the answers to the questions. You're going to be looking at themes. So as doing the data analysis, like if there's something that, you know, a strong word or something, or a theme that we see in the open-ended questions, you will not see like a specific quote,
No, I
because
got it.
that would self-identify that individual.
Sure.
Right.
So that's where you need, I also want you to be mindful that you're not gonna get a paragraph as a, you're gonna get themes, so.
So will this theme work be done prior? Okay.
Will the what, sorry?
I'm sorry, the theme work, like filtering out.
Yeah, that is OSBA's job, that
Oh,
is the
okay.
analysis, the data analysis piece, yep.
Very good.
We'll
Yeah.
get the themes on the February 27th work session.
Correct.
We will be receiving themes as part of the self-evaluation that Scott presents, and for us to do kind of the summative evaluations
Okay.
at that same work session.
Yep, because again, this is just one part to help you in your overall evaluation. It's not to be taken as a single data set, it's to be taken as part of every single part in the
Yeah.
evaluation.
And I think we came to agreement in May about doing our evaluation ourselves, and then getting this feedback and then having our discussion.
Yeah.
Correct. So if there's no other suggestions for the open-ended questions, I would propose doing the working well and then changing that working well to just room for improvement, or what are some areas of growth in regards to the superintendent's role in impacting student achievement in our school district. Seeing nodding heads, but I want to make sure that nobody else has any input. Okay. So this is just a kind of sample of what the survey looks like. It's administered through SurveyMonkey. It gives clear instructions. Folks who take it need to select that they are an internal or external stakeholder, and so that's how we know for sure that it's an internal and an external stakeholder, because again, there's going to be different set of questions for the internal stakeholders than for the external stakeholders. Something to just briefly discuss in terms of survey and accessibility is the language. We do offer this in Spanish and English. Translation's already done in Spanish, so if that's something that you want, I just need to know ahead of time. And we're happy to execute that, you know, for the external stakeholders. If you identify some parents that would, you know, need it in Spanish, just let us know. And we can administer that survey in Spanish.
Yeah, I think that'd be a great idea.
So just something to
Personally.
consider for the vice chair, and the chair and the superintendent when you're coming up with that list, that, you know, if you feel, oh, but this person doesn't, you know, isn't strong in English, isn't their first language, we do offer it in Spanish. Okay, timeline. So let's look at the timeline. Work always backwards. So as already mentioned, on the 27th, after the superintendent's self-evaluation, OSBA will provide a TFS summary results focusing on areas of growth. Again, big themes. You're not going to see anecdotal quotes. In executive session, or in this case, an open session, I believe is what your timeline says, which you have in front of you, a copy. The survey, working backwards, closes on February 14th. I know Valentine's. And then we just want to give folks a reminder, usually a week prior. So on the 7th, they will get a reminder to finish the survey if they haven't completed it. On the 31st is when the survey will be sent or released to all respondents. On the 24th, we send out a notice, and this is just so folks know, hey, survey is coming your way through OSBA. You know, it's not junk, it's not spam, because if you see SurveyMonkey, they may think it's just junk and spam. So we like to send out a notice, just giving them a heads up before we actually release the survey. And then I will need that list, and we can actually, as long as it's before the 24th, I just put as the 17th, a week from now, because I thought we were probably going to identify today. So if you need a little bit more time, to give me the survey participant contact information in a spreadsheet. Usually the board secretary will send me that list, and I just asked first, last name, email address, and then to identify internal versus external, and then for those external folks who would need a Spanish survey. So usually I get 2 separate Excel file sheets sent. And that is the timeline. Thoughts, questions? We just want to make sure that there's enough time for everyone to collect it on the 14th. That gives enough time for the person to receive all the data, their OSBA consultant or myself, to then compile and get ready for the results on the 27th.
I just wonder again about making sure that the results happen after we also give our evaluation. We turn in our individual evaluations to Debbie.
They have to be.
Oh,
the
yes.
17th.
If you look at your timeline, it says.
We don't have it.
Oh, I thought.
I sent it to you and I didn't give you copies, yes.
Oh, you didn't? Okay, no worries, sorry.
So
but,
it's- so I have it up.
That's okay, because I have your timeline right here.
Okay,
So, apologize for the not having a hard copy. So, if you look at the timeline, you're absolutely right. Your own self-evaluations, which are due to Debbie, are prior to the 27th. So you will already have done your own self-evaluations where, remember last time you decided you wanted to do it in Excel format instead of a Word doc. We discussed that a while back in May, or I can't even remember, was it September? But yes, you're absolutely right. So your own self-evaluations will be done, but the discussion will happen after the TFS summary. So that way you have that, those results when you're discussing. So yeah, really good point. And so that's what I meant.
Our evaluations are due back to Debbie on February 17th.
Yep.
And we come back on the 27th to make the big discussion.
Yep.
Including the themes from the TFS will be presented to us after we've already gotten our stuff in. at that
Right,
meeting.
so the board will do their own self-evaluations, Debbie will compile all that, that will then be sent prior to the 27th, and then Scott would give his self-evaluation. After his self-evaluation, I would give the results of the TFS, and then the board will go and discuss, and I will be facilitating that discussion like we did last year.
And we take the TFS themes, we can incorporate that into our summative evaluation, kind of like
Correct.
summary
Yep.
statement. We can use those in addition to our own major
Right.
themes that we've all come together with.
So let me see if I can reflect this back to you. We give our individual evaluations cold. We don't have any other information, and then
Right.
Scott gives his self-evaluation, and then we get the survey results, and then we discuss and come to speak as one voice.
Correct. Yep. That's what is written in your timeline, if you see here. The only thing that's changing in your timeline is when the survey is going to be executed. We had wanted to target the 16th through the 27th, and it's still in that window.
Well, it's actually, I wrote it, I kind of scratched it. The 24th is really when you're going to send it out, and it goes all the way till the 14th of February. So it's actually longer than what that's reflected up there.
Yeah,
So.
it is, because you have quite a bit of time, and we're doing this early, and this is why you want to plan. So kudos to your board, again, for starting the process way back in September and even May, because that's what this helps you with, is aligning everything and having your timeline, so you're not crunching everything together and doing everything in 1 week. So yeah, that's the only thing I would say that kind of got tweaked here in terms of the timeline.
Trying to get streamlined so we don't reinvent the wheel every year. This is good.
Yeah, we've added something new every year, so it has seemed cumbersome, but we will,
We're getting there.
yeah,
Yep.
it'll get easier.
And I've also, actually, just like, you know, room for improvement, right, or just continuously learning. We're also always continuously learning at OSBA, and my team, we were actually discussing, and I showed them this Excel, because this came out of the discussion we had when we were planning. And actually, sometimes some boards will skip this step and just have the discussion, and that's it. So it's really up to the board. You decided you wanted to do this, so you have those cold, right, like you said, just your own observations. It's not biased. So there are a lot of different processes, and that's why you have to approve the process from the beginning. Okay. And Debbie, I believe you have this, and if not, I will send it to you so you have it. Okay, great. Any other questions or comments?
No, just 117. It's the 9th.
What's that?
Today's the 9th. We have to have it in on the 17th, the list of the names.
Or before the 24th, right? Doesn't have to be on the 17th, right?
So let's look at the timeline. I would just say as long as it's before the 24th.
Yeah. we have a little
17th would be ideal, but we're not gonna send that notice until the 24th, and the survey doesn't get released till the 31st, but we would definitely need it before the 24th if we wanna keep this timeline and allow participants at least 2.5 weeks to complete the survey. Is that doable?
We'll see.
Yeah. We'll work on that.
Or we can, just, keep me informed if we need to tweak those dates a little bit. 'Cause yes, that is a little bit of a tight window. If it's the 24th, you have about 2 weeks. So that should be hopefully plenty of time.
Okay.
Good question. Any other comments, questions?
Good.
Doesn't look like it, Janet. Thank you for
Thanks, Jan.
coming.
Perfect, yeah, thank you so much for, having me be a part of this process, and I will give you those results on the 27th and facilitate your soup eval.
All
And that's
right.
all in open session, correct?
27th, yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
okay,
Unless Scott decides otherwise.
correct.
Thank you, Janet.
Thank
Really appreciate all your help.
Thank you so much.
All right, moving on, we have administrator and staff reports. Superintendent is gonna report to us about bargaining and the bond update.
Yeah, so Daniel, if you can pull up the presentation. So I'll be delivering for our team, update on bargaining here. So I want to start off with a couple of comments about what our focus has been throughout this bargaining process, especially as it pertains to the financial packages, the financial package that we have offered. And so one of the statements that we've presented to SFEA, and Steve did a great presentation in October, and this came from that presentation, is that our focus is to make sure that we are offering something that's competitive regionally. I think in our last bargaining from 3 years ago, there was clearly some areas where we were deficient, and we made up in a lot of those areas. So, and we want to maintain that moving forward. So that's one primary goal of our compensation package, is making sure that we are competitive with our neighbors. And one thing that's, I think SFEA would be quick to say this is a tough time for any party to be at the bargaining table because inflation is an issue. And so one of the things that we've stated is that we cannot be completely the sole source of solving the inflation gap. And especially when it comes up to maintaining a ending fund balance that is fiscally responsive, which we'll touch on at the end of this presentation. So kind of where are we at? So we started in April, and our last bargaining session was in December. And so we're at this place where we ask ourselves, what's the process when collective bargaining needs assistance? And that is mediation. And So the way that we look at our collective bargaining agreements is they belong to both parties. Both parties own those collective bargaining agreements because they describe how we do business together and solve problems together. So there's a collective ownership, and so both parties seeking mediation so when we do reach an agreement, we can both own that CBA. And mediation provides a neutral third party through the employee, I'm going to blank now that it's 9 o'clock, but it's ERB, Employment Relations Board. And so they assign us a mediator, and that person works with the two negotiating sides and works as a go-between. Interestingly, we do have the same person that did our mediation 3 years ago. And so I think that will benefit both parties because he's a known person. And so I think that will serve both parties well. And so, when does this move happen? What happens? I mean, you heard Allison talk about it earlier about at that December meeting. I think both parties were working really hard to not be the one to kind of initiate that, but we both were happy about the opportunity because I think we both see this as the solution to help us settle the contract. And so, because we were at this place where the traditional bargaining structure was probably not going to yield an agreement. And so, and like we talked about, this did help us a few years ago in our last settlement to reach an agreement. And I think we were both satisfied to say, hey, we want to seek this together. We released a joint statement right afterwards. And so this was an opportunity using mediation to hopefully get us to an agreement. But we want to talk a little bit about what are the gaps here on the financial proposals, which includes salary, insurance, and the class size issues. It did it to me last time. I practiced on this thing. There we go. So we're just going to walk you through where the proposals are at currently. So the SFEA proposal as of December 1st is a 17% COLA increase over 3 years. So over the next 3 years of the contract, be a 17% increase plus a $1,000 retention bonus in the 22-23 school year, which is a total cost of a little over $9 million. The SFSD proposal is an 8% COLA over the next 3 years and a $100 increase in insurance contributions over the next 3 years. And you can see their asterisk. So we're increasing at $50 in insurance this year, 25 the following, 25 the following after that. And then per month, thank you. Yeah. And a $1,000 retention bonus for this current contract year. And so our total cost over the next 3 years would be $4.4 million. And so I think that this slide here really outlines kind of a side-by-side comparison of where we've been working with SFEA at the bargaining table and a 3-year comparison. So our initial proposal was just under $2.8 million, and theirs was $10.7 million. So those were the initial proposals from the spring in terms of total cost. So from April to December, our current proposal went from just under 2.8 to $4.4 million, and you can look at the percentage. What the increase in there, and then that percentage increase of a 60% increase from our initial proposal to our current proposal, as opposed to SFEA's proposal, which was initially 10.7. They've come down to just over 9. You can see the decrease, what they've decreased by, and the percentage decrease. And so currently, we're sitting at a difference of proposals of $4.5 million between the two proposals. And I think what's different and difficult about where we were 3 years ago and where we're at now is where our ending fund balance was before that we ratified the last contract. And you can see those numbers. You can see just the visually where that slides at. And, you know, we are not in the space that we were when we settled the last contract. And like I started with, you know, if you go back to the first slide talking about wanting to be regionally competitive, we did a lot in that last contract to become regionally competitive. And you can see the impact it's had on our general fund. And I think it's a worthwhile investment to get our teachers a contract that's regionally competitive, but we're not in that same space that we were to be able to continue to give those kind of percentages of a, you know, it was a 6.34 last contract settlement, and we're just not in that space to be able to do that based on where our ending fund balance is at. So that shows you a side-by-side comparison of where the numbers are at. The class size article, we don't have a lot of specifics here in this presentation for you, but it does compound. It is clearly tied to the economics, because the proposals at the table would increase class, would either require us to hire more teachers or would result in additional COLAs based on their proposals. And so they're just linked together with what it would do to us if we were to agree to some of the class size language that they've proposed. I don't know if any of my teammates have additional.
Well, Steve will cover some in his financial report because our audit was just completed as well. And so Steve will have time after the next topic. And do you have questions?
So I've got one question, Dan, just to be clear. It looks like the prior contract, that catch-up, that was pretty much all paid for out of reserves? Is that what that was showing? Our reserve fund is down from whatever it was there, the high number down to the low number? Or
Certainly, reserves did cover a portion of that settlement, yeah.
Okay.
But I wouldn't say all of it. But we knew we were making that investment at the time, and you know, we were lagging regionally, and so yes, it did help support that settlement. Yeah.
And it was a conscious decision to do that. We knew that that's what would happen.
So the settlement over 3 years that just ended June 30th, 2022 with the 13% COLA, which was really 10% COLA and a 3% market adjustment and other items, was between 6 and 6.5 million over 3 years, that settlement.
Any other questions?
I don't know if it's a question. I mean, looking at the ending fund balance, you know, we did all work really collaboratively that last time around to make that market adjustment. And, you know, we hear a lot about how, you know, inflation has impacted us and it's different teaching kids, and we heard them present. What I didn't hear, and what I guess I'm not hearing exists, is where their request is going to come from. Nobody's offered up cutting a major program. Nobody's offered up, you know, some new source of revenue that's going to create millions more than is even in the budget anywhere. And so I'm glad we're going to mediation, I guess, and hopefully we can make some headway there.
Yeah, you know, and the settlement was exactly 3 years ago. It was January 13th, 2020 in mediation, and you know, we had a much better ending fund balance, and it was 2 months before the pandemic hit. Then the pandemic hit, we lost 10% of our enrollment, which we've talked about a lot, and the impacts there. And the legislature in the spring of 2021 passed a $9.3 billion state school fund. That never changed, and that's still the fund. You know, it's the funding level we're at for the 22-23 fiscal year. So, yeah, so that pot didn't change.
I think we're ready for you, Steve.
I think Scott has a few items on
Oh,
the
that's
rest
right,
of
that's
his
right.
here.
So I just wanted to,
Go ahead.
okay. Just wanted to follow up real quick on just some bond updates, if you will. And we're right now planning for the 4th Bond Advisory Committee. This is really getting to a turning point because later this month, during the January board work session, we will be presenting to you a draft of what the Bond Advisory Committee recommends. 3 of you are observers to that process. Please feel free to chime in. I do have space at the end to answer any questions you have. Most of this is just pretty straightforward, but if we go back to the 3 phases of a bond, the second phase is the hardest. The first phase is to get a bond advisory committee together. We did that. We've gone what will be 4 meetings as of January 19th. And we will have a draft of the proposal ready to bring to the board to explain the entire process that was used. How did we arrive at the conclusions? And when I say we, I really mean the Bond Advisory Committee. I'm the liaison to the board. How those decisions were come to, what went into those decisions, and what data did we look at. And so now we're moving into phase 2, which is the most difficult phase, and that is really engaging the community around the recommendation. What do you think? What will you support? If you won't support this bond recommendation, what would you support? Those types of things. And so there's been a lot of thought that we've put into how that might look, but we're still waiting to receive the draft, which will come out of the 19th. And Wenaha will be here with me to help present that to you. Once we have that draft recommendation, then we'll design our listening and learning sessions, our input sessions around that. And this is all with the hope of a potential election date of November 2023. Again, at this point, with the information that we have, I'd say it's more than potential, but the board will make the final call on that. If you recall through my superintendent goals, one of my goals is that the board take confident action, can confidently take action on the recommendation to place it on the ballot November 2023. Any questions on that? So we're wrapping up phase 1. We're moving into phase 2. This is where the work gets hard.
And so this is where you asked us, I just put all those dates on my calendar
Yes,
today.
and I'll get to that as well.
Okay.
Yep.
But that's
absolutely.
the community engagement.
Yes. So that's a visual of where we are there. January meeting, January 19th, will be the 4th meeting. You have all seen the polling questions. I emailed those to you on Friday. I only heard from one board member, and we talked. It turned out to be a really nice discussion that we had. No changes came as a result of that. And this poll is going out very shortly. I'm not going to give a date because we want to protect the integrity of the polling data, nor are we going to talk about the exact questions. The sample size will be 400, which is a very large sample size for a district the size of Silver Falls. And we will do a quick turnaround and process that data and have it ready for the 19th, the Bond Advisory Committee on the 19th. So where's the committee in its work right now? I just mentioned the 19th. There's the Bond Advisory Committee has come to the conclusion that a replacement of Silverton Middle School is the direction that will be outlined in the recommendation. We've had some questions as to what about the freestanding buildings around the old high school? What if we just rehab those? What if we renovated those? We've done that work as well. All in all, with the 21-member committee, the replacement of Silverton Middle School will be represented in each one of the scenarios that we will test with the poll. We then went through these levels of what we've called warm, safe, and dry for 2 K5s and for all the 7 K8s. And Bond Advisory Committee went through that with a protocol of how to prioritize those needs. And about over the past 3 weeks, Wenaha has been taking that and then associating costs, current costs, what would the projection of those costs be, so that they can package it into a scenario that we can then test with folks taking the poll. So as you can see there under A, 4A, test the middle school. You're going to see that in each one of the scenarios. And the plus WSD is warm, safe, and dry pricing scenarios as outlined by the Bond Advisory Committee. And you saw those in the polling questions as well. And of course, the next meeting on the 19th, we'll be working on the draft recommendation. And my hope is that it will be something that the committee is proud of. And I have not confirmed this yet, but you can probably expect to see 1 or 2 representatives from the committee. It's what we normally do when we run a process, whether it's a work group or a committee. We like to have a few of the participants represent the voice of the group, so you can probably expect that as well. So the next steps, we have round 2 of polling. That's coming out in the very near future. Test pricing. The meeting on the 4th, which is the 19th. And then a presentation of what comes out of that meeting on the 19th, the result of those 4 meetings, which is the draft. And we'll give a whole overview of the process that was used. And we'll answer any questions that you have. And then we will take that recommendation with us, and we will take it on the road to 10 independent community listening sessions, 1 for each school community. The good thing is we've had practice last year where we ran 7. And so the protocol, the questions will look different, but the general pace of the meetings will be about the same. And so we will take all of that feedback at each of the 10 meetings, and then we'll take it back and we'll process all of that and bring it back to the Bond Advisory Committee. This is what our community says that they will support, to make any adjustments necessary, so that when it comes back to you, I believe in April or May, that you can take action on that recommendation confidently. The confidence piece is also the reason why we spend so much time designing the polls, so that you have really quality information to be able to base your decisions on. Those listening sessions will continue from January. First one's on January 25th. The last one's in March, I believe, first week of March. So we will be very busy. I just want to say in advance how much I've always appreciated your support. Those of you who are with us at the listening sessions last year during COVID, under tents, when it was freezing cold, hopefully this won't be, you won't have to brave the elements, but I think you will learn a lot as well. And I think it sends a powerful message when we are representing the district together. I'm not sure if there's been many scenarios in the history of Silver Falls School District, the past 30 years, where that has actually happened. And so I'm looking forward to that. It's going to be a lot of work, a lot of long days, but I think it will be worth it. And that is the schedule of listening session dates. We will assign school locations to that this week. This week I will get that to you. And that will go out to our public as well. And we are bringing Jerry Colonna back to facilitate the meetings, because we need to be in listening mode. So it's one thing to facilitate, but if you facilitate, you can't be a listener with undivided attention. So Jerry's excited to do that with us. And we've been planning with him.
You mentioned these are all 7 to 8:30.
It'll be, yes, 7 to 8:30, which is different from the ones last year. This will be 90 minutes, but we feel that that is more than enough time. And I just want to end by saying it's not the bond we want, it's the bond that
Community will support.
the bond that our community will support. That's what we're looking at. And our goal in all of this is so that one day our facilities will reflect the love and respect we have for our students here. Having said that, I'll open it up to questions if you have them.
So as the committee is gathering the information, when it comes to warm, safe, and dry, are they going to be able to look at certain numbers and like percentages of what would go into the warm, safe, and dry? Because we're going to need some type of, I'm sure, this is some type of base figure on a new middle school, and what percentage from that we can also build on the warm, safe, and dry concepts for.
So in the polling questions, there are the 3 scenarios. So that's the best place to look.
Okay.
Because we'll be testing those with the price points as well.
Yeah.
So I think you can find most of the information there.
Okay.
We know what the cost of a new middle school will be. That is not a secret. It's $75 million.
Yeah.
5 years ago, it was about $15 million less than that.
Mm-hmm.
So just be on the, you know, if you've seen the
Wow.
polling questions, that these are also public meetings, the Bond Advisory Committee meetings. So, any other questions?
Oh, I had a question, Debbie. Would you be able to make make calendar invites for all of us? Because it takes a lot of time to put all of that. Thank you.
As soon as we have the schools.
Yes.
Great.
Anything else? Okay. This is where it gets real. So we'll have a recommendation, then we want to know what people think about it. And that's another data point that we can use as a formative assessment, Jennifer Traeger, a formative assessment to revise our recommendation that you can take a look at this spring.
Thank you for
Thank
all
you.
your hard work on that.
Thank you.
All right, Steve, now you're on.
Steve, it's all yours. Steve's going to come up to the front.
Thank you for hanging in and not being willing to listen to this after 9 o'clock. But it is, before I dive into the audit report, I did add this, thank you, Debbie, for posting this late this afternoon. This is the enrollment report as of January 3rd, and we are 4 students above where we started the year, so hey, that's a positive that we haven't seen a drop. So we're at about 40% of our low point of June of 2022, 160 student recovery. So we do typically see a little bit of a drop off in January at the high school level, especially after the first semester ends. So we'll keep a close eye on things as we progress over the next 3 to 6 weeks, and we'll just keep reporting on it every month. So we did complete our audited financial statement for the year ending June 30th, 2022. And first I'd like to thank my wonderful teammates Kim Dowd and Sharon Etzel in business services. Without them, this wouldn't get done. And also for Debbie assembling the hard copies, because the auditors don't do that anymore. That's just because the state actually accepts PDF version, like is on Board Book, which is also nice to have electronically, but it is nice to have something like this in your hands. But they accept the PDF as the hard copy now. You don't actually have to go down to the public service building and rush to get it delivered by the 2nd or 3rd of January, or sometimes you have time to mail it, sometimes you don't. So anyway, so some of you may follow along in the hard copy, others on the screen, I'm assuming. So the pages in the book don't match the PDF pages. So I will try to reference both. So when we talk about the audited financial statement, obviously one thing that we talk about from the end of the school year, fiscal year, is where we think the ending fund balance will be, and we know that's about $2 million, and that's exactly where it came in. I had been projecting that for a while, and I'll come back to that at the end. But so much of the audit really has to then do with, process and procedures, our internal controls, testing transactions, those types of things. Compliance, both for state law and federal law. So first and foremost, the district earned an unmodified opinion, which is, I've always thought, kind of a strange word, but that's a good thing. Modified would be bad. Unmodified or clean opinion on the basic financial statements, which means the auditors have issued a clean opinion with no reservations. Regarding the state minimum standards, as well as the audit on federal awards, which is, there's a lot of that in the back, and I'll point to that in a moment, there were no exceptions or issues requiring comments. So the one thing I wanted to add about this was I was thinking that it really does take a collaborative effort throughout the whole school district at all of our sites, especially principals and secretaries and department heads and so forth to adhere to our policies and procedures and work closely with us. And so I just want to really acknowledge the work that those folks do every day to help us do that. So it's definitely a team effort. So in terms of the statement itself, we'll just do maybe a 10 to 15,000 foot flyby here. But if we start on page 63, which is PDF pages 85 and 86, this is the most user-friendly page to look at. There's a number of letters that are accompanied in here from the auditors. Polly Rogers. In fact, before page 63, there's a state letter and a federal letter, but this is the summary version of the results of the audit in terms of, if there was any deficiencies or weaknesses regards to the financial statements or federal awards, and we have, again, where it shows the unmodified opinion and that there were no findings. It also lists at the bottom of page 63 that they have to test 1 or 2 federal awards each year, the material federal awards, and usually it's Title 1A or IDEA or the National School Lunch Fund. But because we have these new federal sources, they tested the Education Stability Fund, which is really just the federal stimulus programs, the ESSER funds, as well as the Emergency Connectivity Fund, which also was born out of the federal stimulus program, and it was a kind of something similar to E-rate, where we were able to acquire some technology. So they tested those awards in detail. So those pages I think are very helpful. I should also note that the audit report has, because it's due within 180 days of the end of the fiscal year, submitted in hard copy and through the DBI, the database initiative. We have to send it electronically at the transaction level to the Oregon Department of Education, a hard copy to the Oregon Secretary of State, along with a $400 fee, and the Federal Audit Clearinghouse. So those items are done. In terms of some of the rest of the details, just section by section, the one part of the audit that the district actually, through General Accounting Standard Boards, is required to actually put together ourselves and write ourselves, is the management discussion and analysis, which is labeled with Roman numerals 1 through 7 and PDF pages 9 through 15. A lot of the formatting on this is pretty standard amongst districts, but obviously it's our specific district information. And there is a page on the last page of that, Roman numeral 7, PDF page 15, where we're able to really summarize our data in a narrative, an executive summary essentially for the readers. And I'll come back to this page at the end of my presentation, but I think this is an important page to read as well. Page 4, 4A and 5, PDF pages 17 through 19 are the government-wide financials, which talk about our net position. Pages 6 through 14, PDF pages 20 through 30 are the fund financial statements. So it goes through the general fund, special revenue funds, debt service funds, internal service funds, etc. At a basic level, I think it's detailed, but it's not drilled down to its deepest core. We'll get to the back and talk about that in a moment. And then a very useful section, pages 15 through 47, PDF pages 31 through 63, are the notes to the basic financial statements, which cover fund types and accounting policies, as well as cash and investments, capital assets, the debt section, PERS and pensions payable, and a new section. It wouldn't be a year without a new GASB, General Accounting Standard Board's requirement. GASB 87 required us to local government entities to disclose all of our lease arrangements that we have. And so that section specifically starts on page 44 or PDF page 60. And there's a lot of detail to that. Most of our leases have to do with technology, our copy machines, which we lovingly call multifunction devices these days, as well as postage machines. But GASB 87, specifically, the primary objective of this statement is to enhance the relevance and consistency of information about government's leasing activities. This statement establishes a single model for lease accounting based on the principle that leases are financings of the right to use an underlying asset. So that's just something that never appeared in the financial statement. So there's a separate section just for that. So pages 50 through 55, PDF 68 through 76, are again another version of the individual fund financials. And last but not least, another really informative page is page 58 or PDF page 80. This is our required schedule of expenditures of federal awards, also known as CFA. I know I'm going pretty fast, I apologize, but if you turn to page 58, this is a really informative section on all of our federal awards. And in years past, most of these federal awards would be in the 200 series or special revenue funds because they have a specific purpose. And that's still the case. However, the Education Stabilization Fund, which is one of the funds they tested, which is in the middle of the page, you could see our ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 dollars there. Those resided in the general fund, and you'll see that in general fund revenue under the federal sources. It's broken down in local, intermediate, state, and federal. And we accounted for that in the general fund with a special sub-area because as we started into the pandemic, we didn't know exactly, what could be covered by that, and we were having to figure it out as we went along. And we just thought, well, it'd just be easier to account for it there with its special area code, and that's how we did that. So, but if you look at the bottom, you can see in the 21-22 column that we had $5.8 million of federal financial assistance. Again, some of that's in the general fund, some in special revenue funds. If you were to look at last year's audit, we had about $3.7 million. So that really speaks to the nature of the fact that we were relying upon some one-time federal dollars. A lot of these things in here are programs that we receive funds for every year, Title I-A, National School Lunch, IDEA, et cetera. But these special funding sources that will be going away in the next year or two are also reflected in here. So this is a very, I think, informative page to look at. So going back to the general fund itself, if you go to pages 50 and 50A, Aaron, I'm sorry I didn't write down the PDF on that one. This is a good general fund statement to look at here. It's pretty easy to read. If you look at the bottom of page 50, you can see that restricted revenue from the federal government. Usually, pre-pandemic, federal revenue in the general fund would be pretty low. You can see we had close to $3.1 million there. So, when you look at our ending fund balance on page 50A, the bottom line in column 3, $2,002,154. you know, see our ending fund balance decreased by $765,000, and we relied on $3 million of, you know, temporary revenue. So that's very important to, you know, to note. I will also note that we, of course, both, last year was the first year we felt the impact of the enrollment decrease in terms of our state school fund, because we were protected in that first year from the enrollment loss, because they'll pay on the current year or the previous year, whichever's higher. But we were also in 21-22 in the 49% level of funding on the state school fund. This year we're in the 51%. So that was also an impact. So then to take it back to, well, before I do that, the last pages in the report, pages 65 through 71, PDF 87 through 93. This is when you really, you know, want to drill down to the, you know, 500-foot level. Very informative, but also very small and a little hard to read. If you're on the PDF, you can blow it up. But the first page is the revenue by source, separated into sections: local, intermediate, state, and federal, for all funds. Very helpful. The reason this number for the general fund is so high, I mean, we really have about a $47 million budget, and this says 84 million. Revenue from other sources at the bottom there, you see the 35 million long-term debt financing sources. As you recall, that is our PERS bond pass-through that we had when we did the PERS bond in August 2021 and passed it through to PERS to pay down our UAL. So that's an anomaly. And then if you flip through the rest of the pages, there is an expense page dedicated to each particular fund. So general fund on page 66. Very helpful how it's broken down. It's broken down by function or program area. Anything that begins with a 1 is direct instruction. Anything that begins with a 2 is support services. And so that just follows all the way down vertically, each row. And then if you go across the columns, that's the object level, which 100 is salaries and wages, 200 is benefits, insurance, PERS, taxes, 300 is purchase services. See, the big one would be payment to contracted student transportation provider, all of our utilities and facilities and maintenance, charter school pass-through payments to the 2 charter schools. So those are some of the big hitters in purchase services. 400 is stuff, whether it be supplies, consumable, non-consumables, also computer hardware and software, library books, textbooks. 500 is capital outlay. 600 is other, which includes dues and fees, but also includes our district insurance premiums. So that layout is the same for each fund. That's just how that works. Last but not least, I did want to take it back to the management discussion and analysis. I just wanted to read the second to last paragraph on Roman page 7, which states, this is the one part of the audit that you kind of get a little bit of a look forward, you know, on this page in terms of this. Hey, this is how we did. We're compliant. These are our numbers, but this page kind of gives a little bit of a summary and kind of some statements around where we're at now that we're several months beyond the end of the year and how we're looking. So the second to last paragraph, I state, the pandemic triggered financial challenges and future uncertainty that Silver Falls and many other Oregon school districts are working to stabilize from. Enrollment decline, inflation, unknown future state school funding levels, and labor negotiations leave the district with more questions than answers. With the general fund ending fund balance of just 4.2%, expenditure reductions appear likely to return to stable financial ground. So that's my report. Are there any questions?
We have board policy that recommends a 10% carryover, right?
Correct.
So we haven't been at 10% for a long time.
It's been 2-3 years, probably. Yeah. 3 or 4 years. Yeah, it was slowly built to, I think, a high of $5.6 million. And it's always a little bit deceiving when you're being funded on 4951. You're always going to be probably lower in the first year of the biennium at the end of that year than you are in the second. Of course, everything flipped on its head with the pandemic, and then, we did have the settlement 3 years ago with SFEA that we invested some of that, and so that's when it's, there's a lot of reasons that it dropped, but yeah, it's been 3 or 4 years since we've met that level. We were at, I think, about 13% at that time.
So, and we've talked about revising the policy because 10 might be a little on the high side, but 4.2 is pretty low.
Yes, I would recommend 8% minimum, but yes, 4.2% is uncomfortable.
So we're about half of where we would be to feel like we're protected.
Right. Yeah, $2 million is less than the cost of one payroll. That's the way that I like to say it.
Wow.
So on a related question, do you have a sense, I know there's the big question around the bargaining, but if we ignored that, do you have a sense of what our ending balance is looking like for this year? Do you even have an idea?
If we ignored bargaining?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to get a sense of where we are. And if you don't, that's fair. I was just curious.
It's a tough one because we don't have an updated state school fund estimate from ODE yet. We won't get one until early February, most likely. It could come by the end of this month, but they just last week was the due date for our second period ADM for all school districts across the state. They will not update the estimate for each school district until they have that second period. They don't go off the first period ADM, they wait for the second period ADM. They want more data. And so it's really, we know that we've recovered almost half of what we lost, and that's definitely helped. But what we don't know is that happened with everyone else. So we don't know how much is that going to affect the amount per student, because we know that state school fund amount is fixed at the 9.3 over the 2 years. So I really would like to see how that part of the equation works out before I feel like I can give a good answer on that.
That's fair, yeah. No,
But I can also say that, we have between 1.4 and 1.5 million dollars of ESSER left. And then I think about a little less than 100,000 in ESSER 2 and 1.3 and 1.4 of ESSER 3. ESSER 2 has to be spent by 9/30/23. ESSER 3 must be spent by 9/30/24, but I can confidently say that ESSER funds will most likely be depleted by 6/30/23, other than we've tried to set $300,000 to $500,000 aside for HVAC, and we've been working with Amoresco to try to work up a project that could get some things done that we need that would maybe fit within that dollar amount, and so that could take into next year. So we're still trying to hold on to that for that, but so I guess that's probably the best I can answer that.
I mean, I'm broaching the subject purely because I feel like we're right on the edge.
Yeah.
And I think it's just important people realize that there's not a lot of wiggle room.
No, there's not. You're absolutely correct. Thank you.
This is a tremendous amount of work, so thank you, Steve, to you and your staff. It's quite the effort, so appreciate it.
Thank you.
So we're real fortunate to have you and your staff here in this district. So again, thanks for all your work.
Thank you. I appreciate
A
it.
clean audit is no small thing, so kudos.
And I appreciate the hard copy too.
Yeah.
Good.
Looking at that on PDF.
Well, I went to Debbie, I said, I think even though the auditors don't do that, I think that you'd still want them, so Right, I'm glad you want them. I like having, I reference mine a lot during the year, so, yeah. But thank you very much, I really
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Thanks, Steve.
Steve?
All right, next on the list is public comment.
Do we need that since we don't have discussion or action items tonight? As a point
You
of
know,
order.
I promised it, so let's just
Okay.
see. Nobody in the audience wants to speak. Is there anybody online who wants to speak?
I see no hands raised.
All right, we're at future agenda item requests.
Music.
Yes, music is on.
We did hire a music teacher today, Victor
Oh.
Point. Yep,
Nice.
Very excited about that. But yes, we'll come back with a presentation for music to update you.
All right, so we will move now into executive session under ORS 192.6602F to consider information or records that are exempt by law from public inspection, a sick leave bank request. It should be like 5 minutes if anybody's out there watching. All right, we're back into regular session. We are gonna consider a sick leave bank request. I'll take a motion.
Yeah, I'd like to move to approve a sick leave bank request for Kathy Fenimore for up to 20 days.
Second?
Sick leave bank request has been, it's been moved and seconded that we approve a sick leave bank request for Kathy Fenimore for up to 20 days. Any discussion? All right, we'll vote.
Owen,
Yes.
Lori,
Yes.
Aaron,
Yes.
Jonathan,
Yes.
Janet,
Yes.
Jennifer,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
all in favor.
All right, without objection, we will adjourn.